I played your game over the weekend and had a ton of fun. AlphaLink is available on Xbox right now. For someone who's not aware of it, how would you define the game?
I would say that it is a 2D multiplayer arena shooter. It can be played locally or online, even crossplay once we release on Switch, which is in January.
I always describe it as Towerfall meets Night Squad, and they had a baby, and it's cyberpunk and sci-fi themed.
Yeah.
You know, I think the thing that I enjoyed most was like knowing that it's just two people working on the game. It was just the two of you for the most part, correct?
For the most part. We did have another guy that was helping us. He was kind of an intern, and he did additional assets, and we worked through the design and stuff all together. But yeah, for the most part, it was the two of us, and it was like a spin-off of another game that we were making that was too big, and we ended up doing this instead.
Taking you back to when AlphaLink originally launched on Xbox, what was that like for you guys as developers? You know, this game you're working on for hours and hours and months at a time finally comes out. What was that experience like for the both of you?
It was a very rough time for us, because we started basically working on AlphaLink in early 2020. At the time, we just got laid off. We just adopted our son, and
pandemic just hit.
The pandemic had just started, so it was extreme stress, but we just kind of kept going on it. So the day that we actually were able to say, it's going to release, I think it was big on a lot of levels. For one, all that stress that had hit us in the face, we were able to kind of put behind us. And also, this was kind of our goal was to get a game on console, which was the first time we've done so. So I think it was a big deal, kind of a monumental step for us.
Personally and as a studio.
Yeah.
Now, it's set in the overall KOVA Universe, which, as I understand, KOVA was the previous game that I guess was too large in scale to pursue?
Yeah, basically. That was a Metroidvania that we had started on back in 2017, and we were working on that as we were also doing other contracts, and it got to be a little much, so Blake came up with a concept for something that we could get done relatively quick, and that's how AlphaLink was born. But yeah, it's all in the KOVA universe, which we have some of that lore in AlphaLink, and little bits of that atmosphere in there. The
core systems, the way the character moves and stuff, are stuff that we made in KOVA. And when we had worked with this other company, they wanted us to do a mobile game for them, and they allowed us to do it in the KOVA universe, and so we had made this Clash Royale type of clone, but it was in the KOVA universe, and it had a bunch of lore and stuff in that. So we had created a bunch of background story and lore that we were able to pull into AlphaLink, and AlphaLink's kind of now the jumping off point for all the stuff that we want to do for KOVA, whether we do some DLC that has to do with that original KOVA game. It's a big epic sci-fi story that we had created, but haven't been able to materialize it in games yet, and AlphaLink is like our first attempt at that.
When you're talking about expanding the game, are you talking more on a multiplayer perspective or a single player experience, or what are you kind of thinking about on that end? A
little bit of both, honestly. So we want to add more multiplayer modes. I think we have about half a dozen or so right now. So we want to bring more modes in for players to play together. And then we also have been experimenting with a single player campaign that's pretty different from the arena side of things.
Yeah, I mean it still uses the same tech, where it'll be based on the same type of movement and everything, your character. But what we want to do is kind of tell some of that KOVA story that we hadn't been able to tell before, and that's something that we're going to do in DLC as well as multiplayer mode. So both. Yep.
What inspired the KOVA Universe?
Our love of sci-fi.
Yeah, movies and other games. I mean, I grew up, I was a big Halo fan for a long time. And before that, my parents watched stuff like Aliens and Terminator. Same with her. She grew up watching all those. And I've personally always liked first-person shooters, so I wanted to make but we prefer to make 2D games. So at least for me, I wanted a game that kind of controlled like a first-person shooter, but was a 2D game. But that was at least for AlphaLink. But yeah, in general, I think sci-fi movies, games like Halo and other sci-fi games, which I can't think of. Metroid Prime, that was a big, inspiration. Metroid in general, yeah.
That's fantastic. Now, with the game originally coming to Xbox, you guys were part of the ID at Xbox program. Can you touch on that? Did you approach Xbox or did they approach you? How did that all go down?
That's kind of a funny story. So a few years ago, back when Windows Phone was still alive, we had been approved for Windows Phone development. And we were launching a game on there. It was a Halloween game that we had worked on a while back. But in the same process, we applied for the ID at Xbox program. Again, this was years ago, and got approved for that. They sent us the dev kits, and they had just been sitting on a shelf for a number of years. And then when we started working on AlphaLink, that was definitely our first target. So we had approached them. We had been approved way back when, and then we kind of geared it back up again and had been working with them. They're actually their support team is amazing. I can't say enough good things about them. They helped us do a little bit of marketing here and there. They kind of guided us through the whole process, which is very unlike Switch. Switch is totally different. I don't think they really, do a whole lot for the indie devs. But that's a different story.
Was Gamepass something that they approached you on, or is that a decision you made internally not to go to Gamepass, or was there a decision behind that?
That's a goal for us for sure.
Yeah. Xbox.
They curate that.
They
very
curate
carefully.
that. That's what they that's on their end. I'm trying to remember if you when you submit, if you maybe you might be able to say you're interested in doing it, and then they kind of will look through and see if it fits in their catalog. They are very specific about what fits in their catalog, including their early access. What do they call that? Preview, or
yeah.
I think that's what they call it. Games that aren't. It's their version of early access. They're very specific about what they want to have in there. They don't want anything that's too much of the same thing. And same with Game Pass. I think that they're very selective about what they want in their portfolio at the time.
I always just assumed that it was like, hey, if you want to go on it, you can go on it. I didn't know that they curated that, but maybe through this video, we've got enough people who watch this show and use Game Pass, we can create some hype on there to kind of help you guys move the needle, because I think it's definitely an awesome game that would fit perfectly on that service.
Yeah, that's cool. We've actually had quite a few people mention that to us, that they think it would be a good fit for Game Pass, but unfortunately it's not up to us. So yeah, maybe if the more it gets out there, the more interest they might have. That'd be cool.
With your game coming to Nintendo, that's a very exciting moment, because you got it on one platform, it's launched, it's coming to the Nintendo Switch. What can Switch players expect? What can they look forward to? At
launch, it's exactly the same as the Xbox version. I think there were a few bugs that were caught during that submission process that's probably the only enhancement. Outside of that, it's exactly the same game. Different resolution, different frame rate.
It's still 4-player local on the Switch. It's still online.
You're taking an Xbox controller and then you're putting all the buttons onto a Joy-Con. What's the experience like using individual Joy-Cons, or do you have to have a separate controller? So
we supported, I think there's like 6 different configurations for
Which is hard to believe, but there's a lot.
Yeah. We support the Pro controller. We support handheld mode. We support twin Joy-Cons, and then we support the single Joy-Con. So if you just have the 2 Joy-Cons, you can still play 2-player local with just, the little Joy-Con. It was a little bit of a challenge to make sure that it felt right the way we do our controls, but it's still pretty similar to the Xbox gamepad experience.
Yeah, I mean, there are functions that aren't possible. Like on the Xbox version, the regular Switch, like Pro Controller, you can do these little canned chat messages on the digital pad. That's just not possible on the Joy-Con. There's not enough inputs. But other than that, it's basically the same thing, just cramped down into a tiny little controller that's,
That'll give you carpal tunnel.
Yeah.
With everything going on in your game, the other thing that kind of inspired me is you're a husband and wife duo. Not getting into too much of the challenges, but like as a creative, I kind of understand the creative process of getting into the flow and kind of like focusing in on things. What's it like working with your husband and wife on a video game?
Kind of fun. I mean, I always go to we have the no BS approach. So we can kind of read each other really well. So if one of us isn't like an idea, you're just, hey, what's on your mind? I can tell there's something there. And
yeah, I mean, it can still get heated, just like working at another company, and people will be in a conference room talking ideas and stuff, and it's different than what somebody else was thinking. So you kind of, people are like, no, we're saying, no, I thought this is how I wanted to do it. Why would you want to do it that way? But I mean, we eventually can work it out, and we've been working together for so long. It's actually it's pretty easy now.
I mean, we've been together for 22 years now, so it's kind of just part of our everyday life.
I did want to kind of pick your guys' brain, because whenever we get developers on, I always think it's important to kind of talk about some of the issues going on in the gaming industry. And obviously right now, the major story is Xbox, Activision Blizzard, consolidation of the video game industry. As a studio who has, produced games independently and not working with a major publisher, do you think it's still possible for a studio like yourself to kind of compete with an Xbox who now owns Activision or anything on that end, or is that a concern to you as a studio?
Honestly, I think the philosophy that Xbox has is to treat their indies well. Mm-hmm. So I'm not too concerned about it. You might have different thoughts.
No, I think people look for different experiences. When you think of Activision, I personally think of like Call of Duty, and that's about it. I don't think about that they have. I don't think of that as really unique experiences. So I think indies provide that. So I don't think that it's one or the other. I think it's probably good, really, if you're an Xbox developer and they have that kind of lineup on their console. They're going to be attracting a bigger player base, so it's probably going to end up better for you. So yeah, in general, I don't really see it as something that is a negative for indie developers now.
AlphaLink is going to be, pre-orders are going to become available on January 2nd. The game goes live on January 5th. In the meantime, if people want to find out more information about your studio or about the game, where should they go?
Probably Twitter. That's where we're most active still. It's at Hive Media.
Or KOVAGame.com.
KOVAGame.com is also, we put all our stuff there, or a link to it at least.
But other than that, yeah, AlphaLink January 2nd for pre-order in the US for a discount, and then a launch in the Americas and Europe on January 5th for the normal price.
And if you're a PC gamer and you want like experimental features, experiencing that, our Steam Early Access version should be going online in the next week, or within this week, I think, right?
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Thanks again for having us on. It was a pleasure. It was really cool.
Yeah, you as well. I appreciate you guys coming on, and I'm very excited to see kind of the future of what's next, not only for AlphaLink and for the KOVA Universe, but also for Black Hive. Anytime we get the opportunity to support indie developers, jump all over it, because I think the more we can share the story about what's going on behind the game, I think is kind of what's key for a lot of studios, is investing the audience into you two as a studio. I think it's kind of the important part of development these days, because now it's not hey, I got to try out this new game that's coming to Nintendo. It's like, oh, hey, Blake and Mandy are coming out with a game. I want to see what they're up to, or what they're releasing. So thank you guys for coming on the show. I appreciate that.